Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and your day is your day is lovely as always. I have a picture on my screen. I want to let you know that that's where I spent the better part of my week, under the shadow of that mountain, and it was absolutely wonderful. And for those of you who live near Pikes Peak, I would highly recommend joining that group of women in their guild. They were absolutely lovely and enjoyed every minute of it. And hello, Roxanne from New Hampshire. Good to have you on board. As always, you know that your comments, your suggestions, your helpful hints in the chat box are always welcome, and would love to have you do that, and just to say good morning, or to of course, ask your questions. Let us know that you're there. And it's always nice to see names that I recognize. Lynn, good morning. Danielle, Rollin, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Christine, good morning. Good morning. And so today we are going to be making placemats. This was an easy method I learned a long time ago. I'm not sure where. It might have been on the internet. It could have been from a class. I just don't remember, but I like it. It works for me, and it gives me a very nice placemat that I want, that looks elegant on my table. Depending on the fabrics, it can be fun. I can add things to it. I've added pockets and many other items so that I can, have something, as well pretty on my table, as well as it goes along with whatever. If I'm having a dinner party, a birthday party, it's a holiday, whatever. So we call them holiday napkins, or excuse me, placemats. Next week are the napkins that we will be doing, and I'll show you how to get those beautiful, lovely mitered corners on your napkins as well. This one is self-binding. When I first did it, it looked quite confusing to me, because I didn't understand when I was watching it how it was going to happen. I'm going to drop you down to my table, and we're going to take a look at a couple that I have made. All right. This first one, these are the fabrics I'm using today for my Memorial Day. So let me get this first one. This is what we're gonna work on today. How to get your placemat to come out and self-miter itself. And you can do as much quilting or as little as you want to on it. This one is a little bit large. I use it both for center, for under the centerpiece or in the center of the table, as well as I do for a placemat. And with that being said, this one I made more square. And so it really, I wish that, I could get you a complete picture of it on camera. But I have not ever figured out how to do that. And so it's a larger square, but it is done exactly the same way. I haven't done anything different. We get this nice mitered corner. We have this centerpiece in here. This has been washed a number of times, and I pressed it, but when I folded it, I got my creases back. So if you're using cotton fabric like I did here, you'll want to make sure that you iron it right before you put it on the table, so those creases definitely go away. And you can also use it, whoops, sorry about that, I hit the camera. You can use it to make double-sided napkins. It all works the same, exactly the same way. This is double-sided, so you have one fabric on the back, you have another fabric that is on this side with an edging, because again, it is a self binding, or a self-binding placemat. This one was a napkin, centerpiece, whatever. So that's what we're going to be working on this morning. So you need 2 pieces of fabric, and this is where it comes in a little bit tricky. Each time I do it, I make a decision on size. How big do I want this, placemat to be, width and length? And whatever that is going to be, I cut my centerpiece, and usually I will say that I like a 2-inch border around my placemats, and that's a preference. Although on this one I did a 3-inch. So this one was a bit wider around here, and primarily it was because I wanted a little bit of this fabric showing more on the top, and I had a bigger centerpiece that I was using when I made this one. But most of the time they're about 2 inches, which is what this one is. So you can kind of see the difference, hopefully on screen, a little bit different with the 2-inch and the wider 3-inch. So I cut that top accent piece that goes in the middle of the top part of your placemat, 4 inches in length and width less than I'm going to cut my back. Now I did go ahead and give you the sizes that I'm working with today. So the first center one, I decided, and this is going to be a little bit bigger one. And again, it was just a random numbers that I chose and use it as a placemat, but I know it will probably work because I measured some placemats that I have that I like the size of, that fit my table well. And I would suggest that that is what you do, is find a placemat, measure it that you like the size of and work for you. So I started with 12 by 17. So my red one is the 12 by 17, and it's going to be my top accent piece. Then I cut my back side 4 inches width and length difference, so that I would have that 2-inch border when I turned it over. So if you want a 3-inch border, you would cut it 6 inches bigger, etc. Hopefully that makes sense to you, and so you have those numbers there on your, well, you did have them. So the first thing that we're going to do once we have these made, now I have both made them with an interfacing in them and also without. And what I found with the interfacing is that it gave it a little bit more stiffness, and it didn't wrinkle as much. And I put that on the back piece so that I had that that extra weight all in the same place. A few times I've also added it to this piece, which also gave it a little bit more, and it didn't wrinkle as much when I washed it, and that because of the the interfacing helped with that. So that's a choice on your part. So the first thing that we're going to do with these is we're going to fold them in half both ways. So I folded it the lengthwise, and now I'm going to find the center on both sides of the lengthwise piece. And once I have found that, I'm going to put a marking, and I had already kind of done that one on this piece. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find the center on this, on this long piece. And I want to mark it again so that I can, I just know where those, and I had already marked it here. And now I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise and find that center point. And I thought this could convert to both. I can use it at Memorial Weekend, and I can also use it for the 4th of July, Veterans Day, you know, different times. And then whenever I felt like it, it's a little bit red, white, and blue. So I have my, you know, my little fold mark right there, and I just want to put a mark so that I can see it a little bit better when I'm pinning. All right. So I've got my middle on both sides. Then on the corners, I want to mark 1/4 inch on my corners. I already did it on the red one, but basically all I do is, you know, measure in a 1/4 inch on either side, and put a mark so that I, you know, can, you know, stop and start at a 1/4 inch from the edge of my napkin. So now I'm going to take right sides together, and I'm going to line up those marks on the long side and pin it in place. All right. Let me check this for just a moment. All right, then I'm just going to pin it. Keep it in place. And now here is the fun part, because I'm going to pull this side up, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side lengthwise. All right, so now at this point, I have something that looks like this. It's kind of pulling up on either side, and it looks like it's a little boat shape. So I've got that extra in the middle there. And now I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from this corner to that side and this side as well. So let me move you to my machine. Get that nice and flat. Make sure I have it all situated. And so I'm going to start at that 1/4 inch. Oh, you know what? I am so grateful for Miss Kristen, because she told me that I had this all wrong, and I do. I told you to put it right sides together, and I did not do that. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate that. Probably a whole bunch of the rest of you told me that. And yes, I already see it. Right sides together. So now let me go back and quickly get this pinned again. Find my markings. You know, sometimes it takes a village, because I would have sewn that whole thing and would have had to take it out. And wouldn't that have been the pits? All right, so once again, well, we get the pinning twice, right? All right, so, well, you guys don't have to worry about that I am perfect because, as you've witnessed many times, mistakes happen. Just sorry you have to watch me pin a couple of times. So yes, they have to be right sides together. And now let's take this back to the machine. And you'll probably want to, if you do not have the machine that, knots it at the beginning, you'll want to back stitch there so it doesn't come out. So make sure that you know what your machine does to start and stop. And it's kind of important to make sure that you get your napkin lined up in the centers of your piece. So I do hope I marked well today. And so I'm going to stop, and because my machine does, I am going to go ahead and let it knot itself. But there's where you would back stitch, I'm going to have to take a look at my machine because I think my tension is a tad bit off there. So, but we'll go for it at this point so I can finish showing you this. But that's a good time to stop and figure out why your machine is not happy. And for me, sometimes it just simply means that I need to rethread it or check the bobbin. Those were the places where I start, and after that I am not mechanically inclined, and so I call a friend who is, or I take it to my local person. All right, so now I've got this side sewn over here, so this side is sewn, and now I'm going to the other side and sewing that. And you can tell when I get flustered because I forgot to change my camera. But basically all I was doing was pinning. And you were fortunate enough to see that twice that I pinned. All right. Now you all know more than you ever wanted to know. And truly, this doesn't take a ton of time to do. These napkins come together pretty quickly if you do it right the first time. And they're lovely. And if you decide to put interfacing in them to give them just a tad more, I drove over it, so back stitch there. And now, because I went over that quarter mark, I both back stitched and then I did my lock stitch on that. All right, now we're going to go back, and now we're going to do the same thing on the short ends. So I did not mark that middle, or if I did, I don't see it. So I'm going to find the middle of my top one more time. So I've got that middle, and I can see the fold where I was on that. So again, I'm pinning in the center. And I'm pinning on this side. And the other side. All right, I'm going to have to fold this right side out. So the one thing that I need to make sure that's happening is that I leave an opening. So I'm going to leave an opening big enough for me to turn it when I get to that point. So I'm only going to sew part way. Stop and then sew the rest of it. Then I'm going to skip over that section and leave what I think will be big enough for me to turn right side out. So I'm going to start about where that pin is. And again, sew to my 1/4 inch, making sure I keep that edge out of the way so that I'm not sewing folds or wrinkles or anything else into the napkin. And again, I'm going to stop right where I stopped before on the sides, right at that 1/4 inch. So my 2 seams are, coming. I do not know if you can see this in the light, but my stitching stopped right at the same place, okay, at that 1/4 inch mark. So now I need to go to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. But first, I want to go and just see if there are any questions. Yes, I am sewing 1/4 inch. All right. What is the mat on your machine? I think that Kristen answered that with the mat. It's called the Grid Glider, and she's got a link there. All right. What foot am I using? I'm using mine, on this machine, it's my 97D, which is my 1/4 inch foot. You guys are always so gracious to me with, my mistakes, and thank you. It sometimes does get hard, and because I want to do it right, and I want you to be able to, boy, the tension really is off on my machine. All right, I am going to have to again fold this one and find my center point because I don't see it anymore. This fabric doesn't have a memory, I guess, or a long one. So there's my center. There's my center here. So I just want to say thank you for that, for your constant graciousness to me. I so appreciate it. I wish I was a little better. But you're right. 3 cameras. And I can't walk and chew gum. So sometimes it's hard to talk and sew. It's even more fun when my grandkids are here and I need to get something done and she wants to push the pedal. That's always fun because I let her do it. And so sewing at the speed of light, because she doesn't know what it means to go slow, has no clue. All right, and so this side, because I've got my hole on the other, I don't have to stop and adjust for the turn on this. Keeping And I chose the shorter side for my turn simply because I thought it would, if for whatever reason it's not going to show, it never does, but I keep thinking it might. It would be less noticeable on the short side as opposed to the long side. So how's that for being crazy? All right, so now you've got something that looks like this. All right, what we're going to do now is we want to get these corners taken care of. So we're going to fold this so that it makes, a kind of a triangle shape. And you have your piece, folded. And here is where I stopped on my sewing. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I want to put, I wanted it at a 90-degree angle. So from that, so I'm going to choose, something that I can, I can see. And I'm going to draw a line from my thread to my fold. So I went from where my thread ends to the fold of my fabric at that 90-degree angle. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. So I'm folding it kind of like a triangle. And I want to make sure that, it truly is straight. And that my point comes out, and I'm off the camera, sorry. So I want to make sure that my point is straight, and then I've got that 90-degree triangle there, or 90-degree angle. Sorry about that. Finding where the end of my thread comes in. And again, I want to go from my thread. I'm going to draw that line right across that. And because I've already got it folded and I showed you twice, I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to go ahead and sew that. And I'm going to stop at my thread. All right, so I have that sewn right. Let me make sure you can maybe see it in the camera. So I have sewn down and I have stopped at my thread junction right there. I am going to be quite brave and go ahead and trim that off without checking first. And I suggest that you check, especially the first time. And so let me get all of my corners in there and lined up. My 90-degree angle, end of my thread, get my mark, and again I'm going to sew on that line that I just made down to my thread. Trim it to 1/4 of an inch. Go to my next corner. Again, I am taking that corner, folding it back, and getting it aligned. And my third corner, sewing down to where my 1/4 inch seam ended from the sides and the top. Again, I'm going to trim that. And then I have this last seam to sew, and it was the one that I had already marked from before. So I'm just going to put it right under my machine and go for it. So again, if you don't have a lock stitch, you'll need to back stitch so that it won't gape holes in your work. Trim that off. All right, let's go back. So now we're going to go back to where we left that hole, and we're going to make sure that this comes out right. And let's just hope that I did it the way I was supposed to. See if the magic happened. I really like my turning tool from Apiquick, but today I have, it's still packed from my trip. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to work my corners so that they all come out correctly. manhandling these corners a little bit, and then I'll go back in, and because I do want a sharp point on the end of that. And that little applique turning tool, I really like it because it's got that little ball, metal ball on the end, and I can really get in there and make those points work for me. And I can push a little harder, and I'm not worried that I'm going to tear my fabric too much. All right. So now, as we get this all turned around, you can see that on my corners, and now it's basically ironing and top stitching it. And one of the things that I, should have done and didn't do is on the inside before I turned it, I will often press the seams either going towards the outside or towards the inside, so that when you turn that lays nice and flat. And this border is very thin on this one, so I'd probably make it a little bit bigger, simply because I like a little bit bigger border on it, especially if I have a fabric that I truly like. So I might have made this one, instead of 4 inches bigger, I might have gone 6 with those measurements. So you can decide for yourself what you want to do. And so now basically is you press this all the way around, and you're going to close up this hole, and you're simply going to close that hole by pressing it down, and then you'll top stitch all the way around using a color of thread that matches your fabric. And you can do more or less with your top stitching. On this one, I only did one little top stitch, 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And again, once you have it all pressed flat, you can see how it just kind of lays down there, and you get that nice mitered corner. And I top stitched up close on both sides of my fabric on this one, and then I put another row around this edge, and it just gave it a little bit more of a finished professional look. I've also done a 1/2 an inch apart all the way to the edge of my my fabric, and that I like very much too. You basically sew from your mitered corner, and when you get to this side, you start there and go down, and you get a window frame with that. And it looks really nice. But there is the placemat. And now all it needs is a good ironing, and those points need to be poked out a little bit more. Your turning hole gets covered up when you top stitch right along it, and it's closed in, and you've got a double-sided, either placemat or center for your tabletop. This is going to go in the center of my table for picnic on next Monday for Memorial Weekend. So anyway, that is the the self-binding placemat. So let me go and see if there are, questions that I can answer. What interfacing do I use? It depends on how stiff I want it to be. I just use a cheap, like you would use in a collar of a shirt or something, just to give it, some body to hold it in place. I like it because it's a little bit less wrinkly at the end, and I don't have to iron it so much. It is a great stash buster. I definitely. And it goes much quicker when you start out and put the right sides together and all that good stuff. All right, I'm not seeing a ton of questions, and the one question is here that was answered. I think Kristen has put up a link for that. And what Bernina am I using? I have the 770 Quilters Edition. And I don't have the embroidery unit that goes with it, simply because that's not something I have gotten myself into. So next week, waiting on the Korean pajagi kits to come in and things, I am going to do napkins. And I've made a set of these. I think it'd be easier if I drop to the table. And I've made, many of these. This one is not double-sided. I showed you the double-sided, which you would make literally like I did the placemat, except that you're making it as this. But this one is folded over. You get your mitered corners again, but it just looks very finished, and I'll show you how to easily and quickly do that so that you can, make your napkins for whatever occasion. And this has gotten, washed a number of times, obviously, and they just get softer and nicer with cotton fabrics as you use them. And so that will be next week. I'll show you that one. So I hope that you have a wonderful week. I will see you Memorial Weekend on Saturday morning, and hopefully you've got some fun things planned and you'll be around, and we can find out how to do napkins next week. So have a great one. Blessings to you all, and we'll see you next time.